My name is Christopher Rowe. I come all the way from down the road in Grand Rapids. I thank you for having me this morning. The 9 o'clock hour and some of the meditation and the children's time have me feeling like I need to rewrite everything now. So everything is like on point to where I want to go and then pushes it. So we'll see. We'll see if anything becomes improvised. I've known about C3 for at least a decade. I went to Grand Valley. When I went to Grand Valley, I did a lot of organist and pianist jobs, so I never really got to get out much. I think I played a wedding once in the Spring Lake location, but beyond that, I never really got out here. Then when I went through the ordination process in Chicago, my committee at this church called Lake Street Church in Evanston, which is a American Baptist meets interfaith. They call it the Buddha Baptist Church. It's kind of like this interesting vibe. And a few people said, if you're a non-theist, but you're seeking ordination, you might want to check out this place in Grand Haven. And I was like, what? And they said, oh, it's called C3. And I was like, I know that place. So a part of my ordination work, getting to this point, actually was kind of holding in one hand the story of C3 and other communities that have always been pushing the edge a little bit, that have been asking questions and have been illuminating what it means to be spiritual and human beings. I'm going to grab my water real quick. I accidentally took well, it wasn't an accident, but I took Benadryl this morning, not realizing it makes your mouth really dry. All right. So the question that I was asked, or at least I think I was asked, was what does it mean to be fully human and kind in today's world? What does it mean to be human and kind in today's world? Now, one thing I can't stand when I go to churches and hear sermons is that, it feels like the minister is trying to keep the answer at the end, and you kind of have to sit there and wait and wonder what the answer is. And when I was a teacher years ago, I had a professor that said, it's not a mystery. Learning is not supposed to be a big question as to what you're going to learn. And so I like to put the answer just out there, where I'm with you this morning before we even talk. What does it mean to be fully human and kind in today's world? And kind of the place I'm resting right now is that to be human means to understand all of the baggage we carry. It's to understand that we are born and survive through evolution with a lot of baggage and a lot of opportunity. And one of those things is this primal instinct to want to survive. To be human is to want to survive, and one of those things is to be aware of scarcity, to be aware of the things we need and we want to hold on to survive. But it's also to be born with this innate ability to be kind. And so it seems like those two are at odds, doesn't it? The survival of the fittest and this ability to be kind and compassionate. And so that's kind of where I'm sitting this morning, and I'm going to kind of walk you through my own experiences as to how I got there. Now, one thing you should know about me is I come with a lot of strange paradoxical realities. I'm an ordained minister in the Christian tradition that is a non-theist. And so I usually draw on three different spheres that are related, but are independent of one another as well. The first is just experience. So we're looking at a question, well, what are our experiences? What are our personal stories that influence that? I think we all do that. Secondly is just spiritual tradition. What do the great religious and spiritual traditions do to illuminate this? Full of myths and stories and narratives, it's really like a roadmap of humanity. How are other people throughout history answering the same question? And finally, the voices of our time. What are scientists and anthropologists and sociologists and psychologists and activists and artists and writers, and musicians, what are all of these people doing that illuminate these questions we keep asking? So these are the three realms I kind of tapped into this week. I think we're all hyper aware of the issues of kindness and empathy and compassion right now. In this kind of, I call it the post-election world, I think a lot of us are keenly aware of the need for kindness. And without pointing fingers at sides or anything like that, I think it was really becoming a part of our radar before the election. And since then, we've realized the need for even more. But one of the things that I keep bumping up against is friends and family and colleagues and community members who say, I just don't have any more to give those people. I can't even understand how they could think that way, or how they could vote that way, or how they could have that mindset. I'm tired. I don't have the bandwidth to be compassionate to them right now. Maybe some of us can, I mean, I've said it too. I've said I don't have any space for that. But what troubles me is that assumes that there is a cost to kindness and compassion. It kind of puts a value on it. And that's what really got me thinking as I approached this question, what does it mean to be human and kind? Well, what is the cost of kindness? You know, if we're human and we're aware that we're always having this primal need to survive, is it difficult to be both human and want to survive and hold on to these precious resources and also try to extend kindness and compassion? And so that got me thinking about my own life, that realm of what are my experiences. And I always use this illustration because people tend to agree. I get up at 4:50 in the morning, I go to the gym, and I need to get it in so I can move on with the rest of my day. The first thing that happens is the alarm goes off, and my very first thought is that I did not get enough sleep last night. I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that when the alarm goes off. And quickly I shift to the things that I want to get done today. What's on my calendar? What's happening? Was there anything yesterday I missed? What else is coming up this week? Sometimes I bleed into, this is going to be a busy week. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I get up when I pour my coffee, and it's supposed to be a really mindful moment and start the day and sit there and think. And typically I think, is this coffee going to be enough to get me going? So then I watch the news for just a blip, and the news, I'm thinking how disappointed I am in the political climate, the actual global climate, violence in the community. Everything is disappointing me, and then the weather, I'm upset because it's going to be warmer than I wanted, or too cold and not enough rain. And then I move on with my day. I work out, I have breakfast, and as I'm doing those things, I'm still thinking, what do I need to do today? What appointments do I have? Am I going to even have the energy to do all this? And I go throughout my day, and I feel like I'm bargaining right off the bat. I'm saying, do I actually have the space for this right now? Do I have the energy and the emotional capacity? Do I have the money for all these things right now? I'm always thinking about things with a plumb line. Here's where I think I am at, and this is everything. I'm just losing. From there, I'm just losing. Never just meeting the things throughout the day and embracing them, but it's actually this reality where I think everything costs me something. And then I get to bedtime, and if you're like me, sometimes you're thinking, well, I should have done this today, or I could have done that today, and I can do it tomorrow. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just add it to everything else. And before you know it, you've got this litany of lack, I call it. You're already running through this end-of-day litany of lack before waking up tomorrow to a reverie of insufficiency. And I know it sounds really hyperbolic. I know I'm not like running around all day depressed and anxious. But the more I talk to people about this, people are saying, you know what? That's what I'm experiencing. I feel like every day I'm noticing the things I'm lacking, whether it's time or energy or emotional stamina or any of these things. I feel like I'm hyper aware of the things I'm lacking. And I've come to decide that this is not just me, and it's not just Americans, and it's not just people of our time. Because when I look to the religious traditions and the myths and the narratives from virtually every global tradition, this is a question people have been asking themselves over and over and over again. Do we have enough resources? How are we going to come through this? Can we actually do this on our own? And when I look to the institutional history of things, particularly the church, I've never worked in one where they weren't saying, we don't have enough members, we don't have enough young blood, we don't have enough money coming in, we don't have enough energy to do that anymore. I mean, it's perpetual, and so I'm not alone, and so I don't enter this morning feeling like I'm kind of just putting myself out there. For me, to be human is to be aware of that we are always thinking in terms of scarcity. And that's where I enter Lynn Twist. We heard a few readings from her today. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Lynn Twist. She wrote a great book, The Soul of Money. She's from Evanston, where I was living. Lynn, I like to call a economic anthropologist. But really, she's a teacher, and she's a philanthropist. The majority of their work, she and her husband, is down in the Amazon region with indigenous cultures. And what she does is she works to bridge them with what we'd call the modern world. She works with these impoverished indigenous cultures who are trying to maintain the integrity and the sustainability and the vitality of their culture while tapping into the resources that could make them healthier and stronger and more vibrant. It's fascinating, but I'm not really even going to talk about that today. I'm looking at her study of how these indigenous cultures related to scarcity. Because she went in there and she saw them and they were vibrant and happy, but they had virtually like no food and no access to healthcare, not a lot of clean drinking water, and yet they were happy and they were taking care of one another. And what she came to find is that they embraced and understood their scarcity, much like you and I do, but then they used that to liberate themselves into something bigger. You see, they recognized as households, they each were lacking a lot. But as a community, they could bring those gifts of what they did have, and they actually had a lot of social mobility. And so they were liberated out of this crippling mindset that, what am I going to do without this, this, and this? And rather they thought, I don't have this, and neither does my neighbor, but this part of the community does. And we could bring that together because I can offer this to them. And so what she found is that as people let go of that hyper focus on everything they were lacking throughout the day, they were able to be more creative and more kind and compassionate as a community. And they created these like socialist-like villages. And so that's what got me thinking. Maybe to be human is to be sitting with this tension and reconciling with the idea that we all are aware of what we're lacking, and we're not going to fight that off. You know, I used to want to just be such a positive person and centered and mindful, and I was just going to ignore thinking about the things I was lacking. And it doesn't work, I'll tell you. But Lynn suggests that we enter then holding that and embracing what we're missing and embracing what we can offer the community and what the community might be able to offer us. And so that's where I kind of pivot to look at kindness. Because as you remember, I've been hearing a lot of rhetoric about not having enough to offer other people. I can't even offer that kindness to someone. And the election has made this particularly clear to me, especially at the store in Grand Rapids that my husband and I run. We'll hear that all the time. Oh, I'm so just drained by the new political climate, and I just can't find it in my heart to offer kindness or compassion or anything to these other people, kind of pushing them away. And much like being born and wired through evolution, to be aware of scarcity and to have this survival of the fittest mentality is this innate reality that we each are born to be kind. Now, I think when we approach things like kindness and compassion and empathy, we're thinking, not us, I'm not saying you, but I think in general, especially in the US, that religion has the market on that. That to be kind and compassionate and good and nice and empathic, that it's really religion that teaches us those values. I think the church has really tried to capitalize on that, which has become ironic. But the reality is, it's not. A, that is just a construct that religious institution has created. And B, there is a numerous amount of scientific research being done to study that we are wired to be kind beings. And I think it's interesting because on one hand, we're over here talking about to be human is to be aware of scarcity and to want to survive, which is something Darwin was very interested in. But on the other hand, Darwin was very interested in looking at mammals and being wired to be kind beings and to care for one another. And so I think we need to hold those tensions together. There's a study that I have found particularly interesting that kind of pushes this even further. And it looks at kindergartners. I taught kindergarten. I don't know if anybody else has. It's a fascinating age. They're kind of just stepping out into the world. And there's this program, make sure I get it right, called the Kindergarten Compassion Program. It's a curriculum that wraps around 5- and 6-year-olds, and it teaches kindness. And it's more than just this kindness where you're like, pick up the crayon for your friend and do a nice deed. Excuse me. It's really learning how to be empathic and how to offer kind wishes to others. So looking at somebody you might be fighting with and saying, I wish you health. Or looking at somebody that you're having a little bit of a tiff with and saying, I hope that you can be happy. And really teaching them to extend kindness gratuitously. And what they found at the University of British Columbia, was that these children that go through these programs actually experience an expansion of their cognitive and psychological and their emotional abilities. They actually found that they were able to function at a higher level on all of these different areas, and that those children that weren't exposed to that actually regressed from this altruistic way of being into more of a survival of the fittest. And you see it. If you've ever taught, you can see it in our children, that they'll actually be out to kind of maintain as much power as they can, even at 5 years old. And so I found it interesting that we might be wired for kindness, but there seems to be this fork in the road where you either exercise it and you can kind of increase it, or you regress. And so that led me to a study out of the University of Wisconsin. And this one really fascinated me because they were asking the same question then. So what if you get to an adult and you didn't go to a kindergarten with kindness curriculum? I think that was most of us. What then? Are you just out? Has your brain shrunk and you're kind of hopeless? And the answer was no, that you can in fact exercise kindness, and you can exercise your brain to function at a higher capacity. And so what they did is they had a wider range of adults do 2 to 5 minutes a day of kindness exercises. And again, it's a little more than pay it forward and doing nice little things. It's actually this exercise where you identify strangers around you and you say these simple statements. May they be safe. May they be happy. May they be free from suffering. May they have the ease of well-being. It's just an exercise. And what they found is that they would actually see stimulated brain activity. They would see an expansion of other mental and psychological capacities. And so here we are, kind of talking about kindness. And is it something we're born with or not? And clearly it is, but it also seems to be something we need to invest in. That we're not just born and we're good to go, but that we need to invest in it. And to me, it seems even more important because here we are holding in one hand, to be human is to be aware of this desire to survive and to be the top, and holding on to that fear of scarcity. And over here, to be a kind and empathic and compassionate human being. And I think places like C3 and other justice-driven and compassionate-driven communities are particularly aware of wanting to develop that. And so I bring these together through a simple story, getting back to this idea that kindness costs us something. Because you might say, well, I really do want to be altruistic and I really do want to be kind, but I'm tired right now, so I just don't have the space to exercise. The day after the election, told this story in the 9 o'clock hour. The day after the election, I said to my husband, we have to do something at the store. Like, people are feeling feelings, and we have to do something. And it doesn't have to be an anti-this or a pro-that. It needs to be a place where we're making space because people are feeling feelings, and they need to know that we can hold them and that they can hold one another. And so we threw out on social media that at 7 o'clock, the bookstore was open for community. We didn't even know what that meant. And as the day went on, I wasn't sure how many people would show up, but a lot of customers were coming through the store saying, I need a book on being nice, or I need a book on understanding those people. And it was really strange. And a lot of people were upset. And they were saying things like, not today. Today, I cannot be nice. I do not have any compassion or kindness. I'm too upset and drained. And I was a little disturbed because I thought to myself, well, if it's that bad when it's this hard, when is it excusable to be that way and when is it not? And so as the day went on, I thought of this little lesson I've always done in every community with children. And it kind of draws on some Eastern teachings about lighting a flame. I actually was flipping through some C3 photos and saw you holding candles, and it made me think of it. I will hold a flame or a candle with a bunch of children, and they'll have candles too, and I'll say, I want to share my flame, but I don't want to lose it. And you know children, they'll say, no, you'll get our flame and you keep yours. And I'll say, that's not possible. If I give you something, it's going to go away. And so we'll light one of them, and then okay, well, that time it worked. But if we both share ours, there's no more to go around. And so we'll light each other's flames. And the lesson that I like to communicate is with kindness and compassion and love and empathy, you can keep sharing it and it doesn't diminish your own. The Eastern idea is you can light 1,000 candles and it never takes from your own light. And so that's what we did at this gathering. We all got together in the bookstore, over 150 people showed up, and we lit candles, and we said, look, you're allowed to be angry, sad, hurt, broken, out of space, but you have to keep being a light, because the world needs us to invest in kindness. And so in closing, I guess I would simply say this. When I'm thinking about the cost of kindness, which is the title of this morning, I'm still wrestling with whether it's a cost or an investment. Is it something that you give away and it has a value to it, or is it something that you invest in and it keeps on returning? I don't think anybody in here would deny that the world needs people to be more kind and compassionate. And so as we kind of continue this conversation throughout the month of July of what does it mean to be human and kind, my voice in the conversation would be, it means to reconcile and embrace that we are humans, that we are born to be a little worried about ourselves and to take care of ourselves, but to also make that investment in kindness and keep putting light into the world, because we all know the world needs us and needs that light. So thank you.